everyone, this is Marika and welcome back to another session with me. So, we were discussing the fifth unit, which is Principles of Education and Teaching Learning Process, right? Under this unit, we have discussed what is education, what are the different aims of education, what are the different principles of education, and different philosophies of education. We've also seen teaching learning as a process, learning and its principles, teaching and its principles, and maxims of teaching. So in our last class, we also discussed about formulating educational objectives, right? Today, we are going to deal an important aspect under teaching process, that is lesson planning, all right? Now, to initiate or to have an effective teaching, lesson planning is a very important aspect, right? Like how we have seen different techniques that can be used by a teacher, that is maxims of teaching in order to make the class effective. Lesson planning also plays a major role in making a class interesting and effective. It gives idea to the teacher what is to be done during the entire process of the teaching session. All right, so let us see in detail what is lesson planning and how can we formulate different lesson plans. All right. Now, a lesson plan can be considered as an instructor's roadmap. What the student need to learn during the process of teaching and how those activities will be carried out. So basically, lesson plan is a roadmap or it is a guide which says what the student needs to do and how it will be carried out while the teacher is taking the class on a particular topic. Now, lesson plan, it includes not only what is to be taught, but how the teacher is going to teach to the class, right? What are the different activities that will be carried out during the process of teaching and learning? And how will the students be assessed? So, lesson plan is an entire plan of how teaching and learning activities will be carried out. Not just how it will be carried out, but how the students will be assessed after the session is over. All right, let us see the definition of lesson plan. So a lesson plan is a series of event or sequence of events that is designed by the teacher so that the learning objective or a predetermined objective is attained by the teacher. Okay, so this definition says that a lesson plan is series of events that is designed by the teacher, which means the teacher has formulated and planned series of events that is to be carried out within a classroom while dealing a particular topic, right, which engages the teacher as well as the student in the process, and it will help to make the teaching learning process effective. All right. Now, lesson plan helps the teacher to become more effective during the period of class by having a proper idea or an outlined idea of what is to be done, right? So it means once the lesson plan is formulated or once we have a lesson plan as a teacher, it becomes easier for the teacher to be effective because the teacher knows and has a clear idea what she has to do, right? What activities are to be carried out after each activity, right? It must be a properly planned lesson, right? Now here we have to understand that lesson planning is carried out by the teacher before actual teaching learning process takes place, right? So it is something that is planned and designed by the teacher beforehand, and the teacher has to implement that in the teaching learning process. So as I said, a lesson plan constitute of all the activities and all the different performance that is to be carried out during a teaching learning process, and it is done in order to make sure that the teaching is carried out more effectively, that there is no confusion within the teacher about what is to be done next, right? How the teacher can teach to the class and how the teacher will assess the effectiveness of her class, right? So as we have been discussing, education is provided in order to bring change in the behavior of the individual, right? So as I said, the main aim of education is to make sure that it brings and develops changes in an individual, right? So here also, lesson plan is designed in such a way that it helps to bring changes in an individual's behavior. All right. There are various steps involved in the preparation of lesson plan, right? Let us discuss the important aspects for preparing a lesson plan. The first thing is identification of the activities and the instructions that is to be carried out by the teacher and the learner. Now here we have to make sure what are the activities, what are the tasks, and what are the objectives for the teacher which is to be achieved, as well as what are the activities, the objectives, and the task that is to be achieved by the learner. So first step in preparing a good lesson plan involves identification of all these activities that are to be carried out during a session. All right. Now, the second step, now we know what are the activities that are to be carried out, what are the tasks that are to be carried out, right? In the second stage, we have to sequence the task, right? Now, every task cannot be carried out at a time, right? There are different tasks that are to be carried out. So, we have to sequence the task. Now, all the activities and the task must be numbered, right? And the teacher must be aware what is to be carried out first and what follows the next, right? So here we have to make sure that after the teacher knows all the activities and the tasks to be carried out and the objectives to be met, the teacher has to sequence those tasks and activities, those objectives, right? The next one is to determine appropriate instruction aids, methods, and reference, right? So here, not just planning the lesson plan, the teacher has to know what are the different AV aids or what are the different instruction aids that the teacher will be using during the period of class, right? Now, teacher must be aware about different methods she is going to use in the class to teach the class and different references and different AV aids that are to be used while delivering the class. All right. So the next step is properly organizing and managing all the learning resources, environment, and the activities that are to be carried out during the process of teaching. All right. So the teacher has to organize what is to be taught to the students, and the environment also must be organized and maintained in the way which facilitates a good and effective teaching learning process. And finally, determining the evaluation, right? Determining the method of evaluation, how the students will be assessed after the lesson is given to the student or after the session is carried out for the student. So the method to assess the student also must be included in a lesson plan. So here the teacher has to see the changes that were supposed to be in the student after the session and whether those changes have been achieved among the students or not. Right? So there are various things that are to be looked after in a good lesson plan, right? First thing is to identify the objectives, the activities, and different tasks that is to be carried out for the learner as well as the student. Second one is sequencing the events and the tasks that are to be carried out. Third one is determining the instruction aid methods that are used during the process of teaching and learning. Another one is organizing and managing a proper environment, resources available for the process of teaching and learning. And finally, determining the evaluation process. That is, what are the changes that were supposed to occur in the behavior of the student after the session and whether the session is able to achieve those changes in the skills and behavior of individual or not. Okay. Now let us move on to the key component of lesson plan. Now, there are various components that are important in lesson planning. The first one is general information. So now in a lesson plan, we have general information. What is general information? Now, general information is the general information about the entire class. That is, which subject the teacher is dealing with, right? Which class the teacher is dealing with and what is the topic. So this is a general information about that session, right? What is the subject that the teacher is dealing with, right? For example, I'm dealing with CNET. Which class? Second year BSc, right? And topic that I'm dealing is teaching learning process under unit 5, right? So these are the general information. So first key component of a lesson plan is general information. That means when we are planning a lesson plan, we have to make sure that we introduce the content, the subject, and to which class we are delivering the lecture. That is general information, all right? The next one we have is learning outcomes. So from the term itself, we can understand what are learning outcomes, right? So learning outcomes are set of statements which are to be achieved once the session is over. So what should be achieved by the end of the lesson is described in learning outcomes. The next one is learning materials. So learning materials are the materials that are required to deliver the lesson, to deliver the lecture. Next one we have is lesson phase. So from the term itself, you can understand what is lesson phase. The phases in which the lesson is divided to make sure that the teaching becomes effective, so that there's no confusion while teaching to the students. So a lesson obviously has an introduction, a body in between, and the end, right? So the lesson must be divided in such a way. We have already studied the maxims of teaching, right? So lesson phase includes different phases of lesson. Next, we have learning activities. So these involves all the activities that a learner must engage in while the teaching learning process, the activities that are to be carried out by the learners during the process of teaching and learning. Next one, we have active teaching and learning. So this includes all the methods, techniques, and tools that are used during the process of teaching and learning to make the class effective. And finally, we have timeline. This is the estimation of how much time each and every activity will require. All right. So these are the different key components of lesson plan. All the key components are important part of lesson plan and has to be a part of lesson plan while preparing it. All right. Next, we have steps for preparation of lesson plan. So let us now see the steps that are involved in preparation of a lesson plan. The first one is identify the learning objectives. So before the lesson is planned and before the content or the topic is delivered to the class, there should be a proper planning and identification of all the learning objectives. So a learning objective is all the activities that will be carried out by the learner after the session is over. So learning objective involves and describes what the learner will know or what the learner will be able to do after the session is over. Okay? So the first thing is we have to have an objective to carry out the process forward, right? So lesson objectives are those activities that the learner will be able to carry out after the session is over, or those knowledge that the learner will acquire once the class is over. All right. Now let us see the different aspects of learning objectives. So as I said, learning objectives will list out all the activities that the students will be able to perform after the session is over. All right. Now, having learning objective will let the teacher have a clear idea whether the new skills or the new concept that the teacher was trying to explain to the student, whether those concepts have been learned by the student or not. Which means having learning objectives will allow the teacher to evaluate her session, right? Teacher will get to know if those objectives that she has stated, whether the students were able to achieve those skills and concept or not. All right. While we do lesson planning, right, we have to keep in mind when we are writing down the objectives must be SMART. Now, as we have discussed in the previous session also, SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound, right? So the objectives that are formulated in the lesson plan must be SMART. Now, the learning objective must be written in a very simple and clear language so that it is understandable for each and every student as well as the teacher. Okay, now it must be written very clearly, right? And it must be written in a very simple language. And the learning objective must obviously correlate to the content that is being delivered, right? The topic that is being taken by the teacher. The second step is planning the specific learning activities. So we have the objectives, right? The teacher has the objective. The teacher wants the learner to learn the following skills by the end of the class, right? Now, what are the activities that the learner will be engaged in during the process of teaching and learning? Those need to be specified in the lesson plan, okay? Now, to develop new knowledge, to acquire new knowledge, and to develop the new concept that is written in the learning objective of the teacher must understand what kind of activities does the student have to be involved in order to learn those skills, in order to develop those skills, right? Now we have to understand that learning activities are directly related to learning objectives, right? According to the formulated objectives, we have to select the learning activities. All right. Now, these activities will help the student engage in the process of teaching and learning. It will also help the teacher to gain feedback from the student. It will also help the teacher to evaluate the effectiveness of the class and the activity that has been chosen, and helps the teacher and the learner as a team to move towards the desired objectives. All right. Now here, when the teacher is planning the activities that are to be carried out related to the specific topic, right? The teacher has to estimate the amount of time that is required for each activities, right? So while teaching in the class, if the teacher has planned any kind of activities to be carried out by the learners, the teacher must be aware how much time will that activity actually take when it is conducted in a classroom setting. Okay, so the teacher has to calculate the amount of time that is required by the learners to carry out the activities. So here there are few questions under learning activities that a teacher must take care of, or the teacher must be aware about, right? Those are, what will I do to explain the topic, right? What will the teacher do to explain the topic? How can the teacher engage the student in the topic, right? So usually when we see the classes that are taken are lecture method, which is usually teacher centered, right? The students are passive in the lecture method, right? So teacher must understand and must be able to evaluate how will the teacher explain the topic to the class, right? And how are the students going to be engaged in the topic? Next thing the teacher must look after is, what are the real life examples that a teacher can use in order to make the topic more understandable. So there can be many activities that can be planned by the teacher in order to make sure there is engagement of the student during the activities, such as quiz, lecture, discussion, feedback, debate, or presentation. So during all these activities that is planned for the entire class, the teacher can make sure that the students are involved in the process, and the teacher has to plan the activity accordingly, which is suitable for the topic of the day. All right. Next one, we have plan to assess students' understanding. So assessments such as conducting tests, right, test papers, examinations, or the performance of the student will help the student to practice the new knowledge that they have gained, the new skills that they have acquired. So the teacher has to plan on assessing the knowledge that is acquired by the students as well, how much the students have understood. This is also an integral part of lesson planning. So in the third step, we have to plan how as a teacher we are going to assess the knowledge level of the students. Okay, it may be by conducting certain tests, it may be by conducting programs such as debate or presentation on the topic. The teacher must make sure that the understanding of the students are evaluated and it is inculcated as a part of lesson plan. So when we plan for assessment and when we carry out assessment about the understanding of the students, it will help us to know if the students are actually understanding, right? It will give a feedback to the teacher about the understanding of the particular topic. Next, we have planned the sequence of the lesson in a meaningful manner. So as I said, when the topic is vast, we have to divide the topic. We already studied this in the principles of teaching, right? So we have to divide the topic. We have to organize the topic in a manner that can be understood by the student. That is simple, right? So in order to deliver a class properly, the teacher has to plan the sequence, right? The first thing the teacher can do is to gain attention. So before the teacher starts to communicate or deliver a class, the teacher has to make sure that teacher has obtained the attention of all the students in the classroom. so that while the teacher is presenting the topic, while the teacher is presenting the content, the students are attentive and also listening to the class. All right. So the first thing the teacher can do is to gain attention from the students. Next one is to inform the learner about the objectives. This will help the students to know what they are going to see or what they are going to hear or learn about in the particular session, right? So when the students are also aware about the objectives, the students will know what they are supposed to do, what is expected from them, and what they can learn in the particular class, right? So as a teacher, the teacher has to inform the learner about the learning objectives as well. Next one we have is to stimulate or recall previous knowledge. So obviously this we have discussed during the maxims of teaching, right? It is easier for a student or learner to learn when our new knowledge is linked or connected and correlated with the previous knowledge. So as a teacher, we have to make sure that the concept that we are going to deal in the class is correlated with the previous knowledge or the previous concept that was taught to the students. The teacher can recall the lecture from the previous classes or integrate the results of current topic or integrate the result of the activities conducted to the current topic. Okay, so the teacher has to make a link before starting a new concept with the previous knowledge that is gained by the students. And then finally, the teacher can move on to presenting a new concept or presenting the particular topic, right? So teacher can make use of various type of methods, various instruction module, various AVAs to make sure that the lecture is delivered in the right manner. Next, we have provide guidance. So this providing guidance means helping the student or helping the students by teaching them the right ways to learn the lesson, the right way to practice the lesson that is taught to them. So what are the different resources that a student can use to learn the particular concept, to learn the particular topic, and what is the right way of studying the particular concept? This must be taught to the student, that is providing guidance on how to take the lead or on how to present the topic or how to study the particular topic. What are the different resources that a student can use to understand the topic better? All right. Next one is practice. So as I said, whatever is learned by the students need to practice in order to make sure that they remember or there is retention of the concept that is learned, right? So we have to allow time to the students to practice the new knowledge and the concept learned. We can ask the students to recite, to revisit the information that they have learned or summarize the topic, right? What did you understand about the particular topic? So all those things can be recited by the students. Next one is asking deep learning questions. So we can ask questions to the students about the concept that is taught to the student, right? What they have understood, what are their views on the particular concept that we have discussed about, right? So we have to ask deep learning questions to the students. Next one is create a realistic timeline. So here, as I said, the teacher has to formulate the objectives according to the time they have, right? So here also the teacher must be able to estimate the time that is required for them to carry out the teaching learning process, the activities that are being carried out during the process of teaching and learning. Not just completing the content on the time, the teacher must make sure that the teacher has a free time of at least few minutes so that all the questions of the students can be answered, all the doubts that the students have can be cleared. Finally, we have being flexible or be flexible. So now while the teacher is making the lesson plan, the teacher has to be flexible. The teacher must be ready to adjust if there is any kind of changes or if there are any kind of student needs which was not addressed by the teacher while formulating the lesson plan, right? The teacher already formulates the lesson plan. Now, while the teaching process is being carried out, if there are certain needs of the student, if there are certain areas that requires the teacher to focus on that, the teacher must not only look after attaining the objective, rather the teacher must be flexible and allow time to the student to understand the concept better. So teacher has to see what is more productive rather than just sticking to the plan and attaining the objective. The teacher has to see whether the objective that the teacher have listed out is the effective way or is the productive way, or whether the teacher can shift the focus to the student and help the student get a better knowledge on the concept. So this brings us towards the end of lesson planning. In our today's class, we've seen what is lesson plan, what are the different key components of lesson planning, and what are the steps for preparing a lesson plan, right? So there are various things that a teacher has to keep in mind while formulating a lesson plan, right? So lesson plan is a very important aspect in teaching because it provides a detailed outline of what the teacher has to do. It also gives an idea to the students what is expected from them, right? So formulating a proper lesson plan before the lesson is a very important part in the process of teaching and learning. All right. So this brings us to the end of the 5th unit, which is Principles of Education and Teaching Learning Process. I hope the class was helpful and I'll see you all in the next session. Thank you.